Time for The World This Week. 7 days, 4 Paris-based correspondents, 1 hour with us. Craig COPETAS of Quartz and The Atlantic. How are you, sir?
Okay, Francois.
Also joining us, he's fresh off the train from Berlin. Toni CRUANYES of Catalan television station TV3. Franco-Syrian photojournalist Ammar ABD RABBO. And Paris traffic could not keep her away. Come on in. Hamdam MOSTAFAVI. Hamdam MOSTAFAVI.
Making an entrance.
Making an entrance, exactly. But it's not a late arrival. Hamdam MOSTAFAVI of Courrier International, which brings you a sample of the world's best from newspapers around the world.
Yeah, translated into French.
And translate them into French, exactly.
Yeah.
But you have partner sites that also work in English, like Press Europe.
Yes, Press Europe.
Most notably. The World This Week, where you can always join the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter, our hashtag TWTW. Too early to say if the world's a different place after UN week in New York, but you could make the argument. Iran's new president courting Western media, disowning nuclear weapons ambitions. And while Hassan Rouhani may have ducked out of a handshake with his U.S. counterpart, his foreign minister hit the mark with an unscheduled bilateral meeting and the promise of fast-track nuclear disarmament negotiations announced in the company of the U.S. Secretary of State.
Needless to say, one meeting and a change in tone, which was welcome, doesn't answer those questions yet, and there's a lot of work to be done.
Agreed to jumpstart the process so that we could move forward. Now we have to match our words with action, and that's, I hope, not the challenge.
All right. In French, is an expression. What is it? One sparrow doth not make the spring.
Yes, that's true. It's crazy what a change of style can do.
But it is nice to see people smiling and shaking hands.
Yeah, it's nice, but I don't think it's enough yet. But no, it's really nice that this year the president's discourse at the UN was more friendly than what Ahmadinejad did the 8 years before. And I think there are some things happening right now in Iran. There's been a release of political prisoners. Nasrin Sotoudeh is one of them, very famous lawyer who was defending Shirin Ebadi at some time. So there are some things happening. There are new newspapers that are opening. There's a bit of fresh air, but I'm not sure that we'll solve the nuclear issue so easily.
Hamdan, what surprised you the most from this week?
Maybe all the row about the Holocaust with the CNN interview, because the Iranian president did an interview with Christian Ampur on CNN and said that kind of recognized the Holocaust, but the way Iranians do. That means he didn't say it was the most important event. He said it was a massacre among other massacres. So it's strange for me to see how people focus on that. And but the same week he announced that he wants to solve the nuclear issue in 3 months. So I think maybe that's more important, but I don't know, it's really strange. The way every word, that's what surprised me, every word he says is collected and commented like, he's going to change the world. But it's true, we have to wait until what they do.
All right, he was the center of attention. Lebanese daily L'Orient Le Jour headlined, Obama extends his hand to Rouhani, and Hollande shakes it. François Hollande did get that handshake in. What do you think, Craig COPETAS? Looking at those images, François Hollande, why did Rouhani duck out of the handshake with Obama, but he shook Hollande's hand?
Oh, these madcap Iranian society playboys, when they go to New York and serve their fish kebabs to all the journalists who want to go see them. Look, this is wonderful, wonderful dinner theater. And people are going to parse this in so many different ways. But I think you put your finger on it. You mentioned 2 key words here, Holocaust, Israel. Frankly, I think this chemical weapons thing is an important sideshow, but nonetheless a sideshow. There is going to be no traction anywhere on any of these issues until 2 things first happen. The Iranians recognize the right of the state of Israel to exist.
But Hassan Rouhani, in his speech on that point, said, "I'm going to follow the Palestinians' lead." Am I right? He said, "I'm going to follow the Palestinians' lead. Whatever
And how
whatever
have they been
goes."
doing over the past 35 years on that? The Israelis have to stop building settlements, and no matter how much nice talk you might want to make about the Iranians and this new regime of madcap folks, they still have centrifuges running down there. They're still financing international terrorism, and the issue comes back to making a bomb. So this is all real nice. I think Obama should have tracked this guy down and shook his hand. But, you know, they have to keep their diplomatic niceties. I think it's way too early to tell. And these people who are prognosticating what's going to happen, because we have, you know, Warren Beatty now playing the new president of Iran. He looks so great. Well, come on, we've seen this all before. There is so much distrust. The Americans during the Cold War trusted the Russians more than anyone does now, this new regime in Iran. And let's not forget that. Iran controls a global regime of satraps, terrorist cells who they fund and arm to do terrorism. Just look at Kenya. So I think
Wait a minute, you're putting a link between
No,
Iran
it's
and
not the
Kenya.
same. To link Kenya and Iran. I agree
not
that
the
they're
same
doing
people,
bad
I
things,
think.
but I don't.
you mean to say you don't think the money that these guys are getting is coming through some of these systems? I believe that it is. The problem
If
is
it's,
not isolated to one simple issue.
Yeah, but it's not
I
all
agree.
If
Iran.
it's Al-Qaeda, you know where the money of Al-Qaeda comes from.
Well, that comes from the Saudis.
And
Exactly.
the US 15 or 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's not
Which
the
are the
Iranians.
enemies of,
It was
Iran.
to
But
which
counter
terms?
Which
Iran.
fact,
I
the
think we're
point
mixing
is
too many
that
things here.
there's enough responsibility to go around. But at this point in time, it doesn't matter which faction is funded by Shias or radical Sunnis or Wahhabis. It doesn't matter. There is
Well, no,
an
I
issue
don't
here.
agree.
It
does
does to a
matter
certain
a lot.
point, you know.
I agree. It's too simplistic to just say that because they met in New York and they are in better terms in the negotiations. That doesn't mean that everything is open, everything's done. I agree. That would be simplistic, even though the headlines the last 2 days seems to indicate that. But I think that's a lie, and we will see in the next months how in the nuclear factor will still be there. But at the same time, I wouldn't mix that with what happened in Kenya, or I wouldn't mix that with Al-Qaeda, because that's definitely nothing to
All right,
do.
and we will talk about what happened in Kenya. On Facebook, we have a comment from Ryan. The Ayatollah, not the president, ultimately controls the country. Rouhani's putting on a good face and for the world, and the Ayatollah still seeks nuclear weapons. So Ryan wary as well. Why that handshake didn't take place is actually important to some people. And the new Iranian president said, well, these things take time to prepare. We need to prepare for that sort of thing. That's what he's told American television. The Iranian president cagey on his motives for missing the Tuesday lunch hosted by the UN Secretary General. The Tehran bureau of the Los Angeles Times, though, reports that one idea floated in the Iranian capital was that he was put off by the fact that wine was served at the lunch. Not sure if that's the case, but David Ignatius in the Washington Post said, rather, he didn't want expectations to be too high.
Yeah, that's too much for the first time he comes here. And it would be, I think, it's a bit soon for Iran because they've been calling the US the Great Satan for 35 years now. So it's a bit too sudden to do that. And they are, you know now in Iran they are trying to say union sacrée, I don't know, sacred union between the hardline conservatives and the reformists. Everybody's like putting on a good face. If they start shaking American president's hands, it's a bit too much. Not everybody can agree on that. So.
Well, I think the international situation right now wouldn't it would explode somehow if to the problems in Syria we would add an increasing of the heat in Iran. So I think that was absolutely necessary to calm down, even though it's just for a few months, the issue of Iran. Even at the same time, that doesn't mean that Iran is going to change a single thing about their nuclear weapons program. But I think it would be too much just not to calm down the issue in the eve of UN.
All right,
General Assembly.
toning down the rhetoric.
I mean,
Ammar ABD.
Your Facebook reader was right. I mean, in Iran, we all know that the president is a kind of vitrine, you know, of
Window dressing.
a window, yes, to the regime, and the supreme guide is the real man in power. I'm not an expert in Iranian affairs, but this week happened in the same time with the UN. Happened a very little micro story, but tells a lot that Iran maybe is not that ready to. There was an Iranian Quran news agency that did an interview with a French teacher, Jean-Pierre Filieux. He's a political sciences teacher, to talk about Syria and about the Supreme Guide and the Zionist entity and things like that. It was, of course, totally fake. He never gave this interview. It was totally fake and done in an office in Tehran or in Damascus or somewhere. And it's funny because these are really very old methods. I mean, it's very different from the modernity we might expect from the...
It's interesting what you're saying, because we're back to a conversation we've had over and over again. Will the real Iran please stand up? Last time you were on, you, Hamdam MOSTAFAVI, were saying, well, he's Rouhani, the guy who calls the shots is Ayatollah Khamenei.
Yeah, but that's interesting.
After this week, do you get a sense that there is kind of an internal tussle going on?
No, I don't think so, really. I don't
You still stand by
Yeah,
that?
because if Rouhani does that, because now Iran has come to a position where they have to put on a nice face, because the only other alternative would have been war. There's already war in Syria. It's almost like a war in Iran, a war in Syria. So another front would have been too much. So now they need time. They need time to do.
How much leverage is the allegedly new administration in Tehran and the holy city of Qom actually going to exercise to de-escalate the global and regional issues?
I'm not sure very much, but I think it's
Well,
mostly
then thanks for
internally.
coming to the party. Here's your coat. See you later. You know, they've got the formalities right. You know, get the formalities right, but you know, never mind about the moralities here.
Yeah, but I think it's too easy to always criticize and say when
They said they want to speed up negotiations.
Yeah. When it's Ahmadinejad coming and saying we want to destroy Israel, everybody's like, okay, we don't talk to Iran. When it's Rouhani coming saying we want to talk, so okay, let's try it at least.
They're making
sure.
efforts.
Let them make efforts. That's
The
fine.
other question is an internal issue. How is opposition in Iran seeing all this? Because it's a way to disarm the opposition. That it was having Ahmadinejad was very easy. Was very easy to have somebody like him just taking stage. But now is it like dismantling part of this young, educated people that at some point were asking for the Arab Spring becoming a Persian Spring?
And it's very counterintuitive as well, because look who the new administration in Tehran has put the pressure on. The Israelis. The Israelis are the ones here who are having to come out and try not to look like the bad guys, to say, don't trust these people. We've heard this before. And everyone is really willing, apparently, if you read a lot of the press, they really want to embrace this overture.
And by the way, goodwill among men extending to the UN Security Council this week. Russia and China agreeing to a resolution obliging Syria to abandon its chemical stockpiles and forcing Damascus unfettered access to UN inspectors. There you see the draft resolution as it was worded. Ammar ABD RABBO, we know that already the UN Chemical Weapons Inspections team says that there's 7 sites, no longer 4, that are purported to have chemical weapons. But there again, are we being too cynical when we say, oh, this is all going to come to naught?
Maybe I should be like Hamdan, and say, well, let's wait and trust what might happen. But to be honest, it's true. In the last months, there were plans with the Arab League, there were plans with the EU, there were a lot of people coming and a lot of promises and plans with 6 or 7 or 8 points, and everybody signs it and everybody's happy. But at the end of the day, nothing changes. It's the same killings every day. If it's not with chemicals, it's with airplanes. If it's not with airplanes, it's with Scud missiles, etc., etc. So, unfortunately, the Syrian people have the feeling that they've been totally left over. In this whole handshakes and parties.
Well,
and
they have this
etc.
impression because it's true. This is the situation, and I think what they've the deal they struck, the Russia and the US, basically, even though France was around trying to help somehow. But what has happened at the end is just a solution for both diplomacies, but it adds to nothing for real people.
I think it's going to be
in
successful
Syria.
for the simple reason that Russia's in the driver's seat here. And if Putin wants it to happen, and the Chinese are going along with him, it's going to happen because it's going to make Obama look even worse than he is now internationally. So I actually think this is a really good sign.
What do you mean? What's
I
going to
don't
happen?
see that.
Oh, I think the chemical weapons will go.
Ah, okay.
No, I believe the chemical.
I don't know, because this week Bashar said that he needs $1 billion to and a year. So
Exactly,
that's
that will
that's
take
a lot of
so
time.
long,
and
and it will. It's so
While the Washington
difficult
Post
to.
is reporting the opposite, that it could be easier to dismantle than first thought. If Bashar al-Assad doesn't comply, there's a slight hitch. You'll need a second resolution to approve force, which the Russians, listening to Sergei Lavrov's speech this Friday, don't look like they'll agree to anything like that. But with all of the diplomacy route being tried this week, does it make it easier for Barack Obama to bypass the United Nations? Should push come to shove when it
Oh,
comes to Syria?
yeah, maybe you can say that all diplomatic issues have been tried, and now if Bashar doesn't dismantle, they can strike. But I don't think it will come to that, because I think we'll see a slow process of dismantling, and you'll only know if they have or they don't have chemical weapons after a few years. You can't know for sure if they've dismantled everything, I think.
Final point, as the threat of U.S.-led intervention recedes, fighters inside of Syria seem to no longer be counting on the West. 13 factions representing various shades of Islamists disowning the Istanbul-based Free Syrian Army this week. What does that say? Where are we going?
It's very logical in a way. I mean, these people have been waiting and waiting because we say they're Islamists. When you look at the list, there are some that are less, they're more moderate or they're into secular state for later, but whatever, all these people have been waiting for a long time for promises, for funding, for weapons, for support. They have nothing. Why would they still wait for Istanbul? For the coalition, the Syrian coalition that is backed by the West, that you see the president received at the Elysee Palace in Paris, or now he's in New York at the UN. But at the end of the day, their situation on the ground is really terrible. They hold because they do have a lot of popular support, but nothing. There's not at all support from outside. And let's put it right. We hear a lot of people saying we don't help Syria because there are a lot of Islamists and jihadists and it's tough. But the truth is that there are a lot of jihadists because we don't help Syria. It's the other way around.
Chicken and egg.
It's a catch-22.
Exactly.
When we come back in the world this week, we'll be looking at the question that Craig COPETAS posed, which is who is behind that attack on that mall in Nairobi? Stay with us.